everyone. I'm so glad to see all of you here today. So most of us in this room are concerned about our weight and our health or the lack of health that goes along with that. And there's so many studies out there that tell us one thing or another. But I ran across this study that I thought was really important and very telling. This study found that women who carry a little bit more weight live longer than the men who mention it. Oh boy, is that true. Today is National Mason Jar Day. Today commemorates an ingenious invention which was patented in 1858 by John Landis Mason. As many of you know, it's a molded glass jar which is used in home canning to preserve food. They're also called ball jars, fruit jars, or simply glass canning jars. And they're not just for canning. They're very versatile, used in many DIY projects such as shabby chic vases, painted desk caddies, gift containers, herb gardens, tissue holders, or even miniature fairy gardens. The uses are endless. So let's begin our meeting today with a verse of America.
My country is the peace free land of liberty, of the I sing. Land where my waters guide, land of the pilgrims bright, from every mountain side, let freedom ring.
And Jim McCullough will give our invocation today.
Excuse me.
A spiritual experience that I had this past week was visiting the gallery on the second floor of Malvern Art Museum at Washington University. If you have not been there, because they're not going to be having this display very much longer, I highly encourage you to visit the museum and to see the display that's entitled Speaking Volumes, and then a subtitle, Dismantling Hate, Transforming Hate, excuse me. And it's the story of, and depicts the actions of one Ben Klassen, or Clausen, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, who in Superior, Montana, began a white supremacist church, I say with a small c, honoring a god with a small g. But it was a spiritual experience. I had been asked to be in a panel discussion at Washburn, and I studied that carefully to get a real feel for what they're really telling. And it so happens that the Minnesota, as a result of a number of things that happened throughout the years, one of them being Clausen ultimately hating himself so much that he committed suicide, the movement fell apart. But the Montana Human Rights Commission received thousands of volumes of the book that he wrote, number of books that he wrote, one of which was entitled The White Bible. And those books were literally dismantled, and art pieces were made out of them. What a powerful, powerful, not just a symbol, but a reality. Because we see hatred demonstrated in our daily news. We see prejudice demonstrated in high places. To see those books dismantled and an art piece made out of them reminded me of our mission and our vision as people of faith, as people of Rotary, whatever it is that motivates you, to dismantle prejudice in the way those books were dismantled, to dismantle hatred, to dismantle racism, to dismantle white supremacy. May it be true. Amen.
Thank you, Jim. Our guest introductions today will be done by Jim Walden.
please introduce your guests. And then guests, please remain standing until all are introduced. First off, Rayhan Reza. Please introduce your guest.
My guest is my younger brother, good friend. I think I know him for almost 25 years, right? So he lives in Wichita, and his name is Mahbub Khan. He is a realtor. I told him to join Wichita Club, so we learned about Rotary first time.
Nice meeting you.
Next is the guest of Landos.
My guest is Oscar Three, a retired counselor who I want to tell you we have his application as a new member.
Carol Jordan.
My guest is Patrick Woods. Proud to introduce him. He's a member of the 501 School Board, past president, and coming in to be the state school board president. He has an MPA from KU, and he's the father of Zen himself.
Wayne Pankos, would you please introduce your guest?
Please introduce to you my development director, Erin Aldridge. She works for me, and her primary responsibilities, most of you will recognize the 20 Under 40 event is one of her big events that she does, as well as a number of other fundraising events for us.
And next is Doug Scott.
My guest today is Dr. Mike Atwood. Mike is our Chief Medical Officer at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas, a KU grad and avid fan.
And finally, we have two visiting Rotarians, both from Burlington. And I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. John O'Taylor and Chuck Trimble. Please join me in welcoming our guests.
We are so glad that all of our guests are here today. Now, I want to give you fair warning because we're going to try a little something new next week with guest introductions. We will have the person who's actually doing the introductions read everything from the microphone so that you'll all be able to hear. And then, after one particular guest has been introduced, we will give them an official, personal Rotary welcome, such as, "Hi, Gertrude."
Hi.
Yes, okay, well, we're going to practice, so we'll try it, and if it needs to be tweaked a little bit, we'll do that. Or if you want to fire me as president, you can do that. This month's featured charity is the Islamic Center of Topeka, and this is for their third annual Thanksgiving turkey giveaway and coat drive, which happened about a week or two ago, I believe. So anyway, please give generously so that activity continues in the future as well. We have several announcements today. This has been a really busy, wonderful Rotary week. You may have seen some pictures up here. We had Covered in Coats at Pine Ridge Prep on Monday. We had a shopping night for the Hyde Park Interactive Christmas Project on Tuesday night. We, of course, have our meeting today, and we have a social tonight. The social will be at the Norseman Brewing Company in Noto at 830 North Kansas Avenue. It'll last from 5 until 7:30, or if you want to stay longer, that's going to be up to you. Family and prospective members are absolutely welcome, and we would love to have you bring them. The Norseman now has a food truck, so we can't bring any food in, but the food will be available for you to order. But instead of food, what we'd like to provide is a drink ticket for everybody who comes. So you can trade that in, or just turn that in for your drink, for a beer. And we're going to ask that you probably not use the 64-ounce growler, which is a little bit more beer and more expensive. So we'll use the four-way test on what you get. But nobody's watching. We will also have a service opportunity that tonight. As you know, we're very active with the Highland Park Interact Club. And one of the things that we've been doing is helping them with their Christmas project to help single student parents be able to provide Christmas gifts to their children and to have that entire experience. And one of the things we'd like to have you all help with, if you'd like tonight, is tying fleece blankets, and they're cut around the edges and you just tie them so they all stay together. So you don't have to do that, but if you do choose to do it, we ask that you not spill any beer on it, please. And if you have any extra scissors to bring, that would be helpful as well. So please come tonight. I think it'll be lots of fun. We have today a blue badge presentation, so Terry Hobbs and Edie Sneeden, if you would both come forward, please.
Hello. I have a excellent blue badge member that I'd like to present to you. Edie Sneed.
Hi, Edie.
Yeah. Thank you. You all know her because she's been socializing with us, working with us from the go. She's attended an orientation. She has greeted members. She's made a contribution to the Topeka Foundation or Rotary, gave invocations, introduced guests, and she attended the district team training right away. Isn't that wonderful? The wonderful thing that she did, too, is she wrote 2 of the club district grants. And it helped this year so much. We got everything that we could from them, right? One thing I really would like to tell you about is Edie loves kayaking. She kayaked in Croatia, I still want to call it Yugoslavia, which is amazing. She has some excellent stories. You're going to the social tonight? Yes. All right. Talk to Edie there. But anyway, I'm very proud and pleased to give her the blue badge. And Grace is going to be
I just want to say thank you to everyone here. I've always had a passion for community, and when you're retired, you get to pick and choose where you spend your time. And so this is a good place for me because it gives me an opportunity to talk to Topeka and help others. Thank you.
You've done an incredible job, so you were great. We have a wonderful speaker today, and Andy Chandler will be introducing him.
So let me leave it.
It's my pleasure to introduce the Chancellor of Kansas University, Douglas Girod. He was born in Oregon, he tells me, and began as the 18th Chancellor at the University of Kansas in July of 2017. A head and neck surgeon, he earned his bachelor's degree from the University of California at Davis and his medical degree from the University of California in San Francisco. He's been on the faculty at the University of Kansas since 1994 and has served in a variety of administrative roles, including Executive Vice Chancellor at the Kansas University Medical Center. Girod became Executive Vice Chancellor at the University of Kansas Medical Center on February 1st, 2013. There he oversaw the educational, research, patient care, and community engagement at the University of Kansas School of Medicine, Nursing, and Health Professions, with a total annual enrollment of more than 3,000 students. workforce of more than 2,100 faculty and 4,000 staff, and research funding of nearly $100 million. The Chancellor is the Chief Executive Officer of the University of Kansas, overseeing campuses in Lawrence, Kansas City, Overland Park, Salina, and Wichita, in addition to the research and educational centers in Hayes, Parsons, Topeka, and Yoder. And I noticed in reading the alumni magazine that he's talented, he rides a motorcycle, but that's not why he's on crutches. I'll let him. If you'll please follow me to the podium, Chancellor, we're anxious to hear from you.
Thank you, Andy. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon, and thank you all for giving me the opportunity to come talk with you today. I think the Rotary organizations are so incredibly important to building vibrant communities, and it's through passionate community members like you all that make that happen. So thank you for what you do as a Rotary for Topeka. It really makes such a difference in our communities. Andy's correct. This wasn't from falling off my motorcycle. I looked a lot worse, I think, actually, by falling off my motorcycle. This was playing basketball with my kids on Thanksgiving. And just for the record, I made the shot, but I did not stick the landing. So I broke a bone in my foot and actually need to get a screw put in it next week. So a little bit of diversion, but otherwise it was a great, great holiday. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving as well. We couldn't have asked for better weather, that's certainly true. You know, it's been a real pleasure to step into this role as Chancellor of the University of Kansas. Obviously, extremely humbling opportunity. But as Andy mentioned, I've been a Jayhawk for 23 years and have really dedicated my post-military professional career to the University of Kansas. Obviously on the medical center side for the majority of that time. And it's clear that, in my mind, that KU has such an important role to play, obviously in the Lawrence community, but really in the state and in the region, nationally and globally. And when you really look at the depth and breadth of activities across our university, we certainly are filling those roles quite well, I think. And I did, in anticipation of today, I wanted to ask the question of what's KU's connection to Topeka from an educational perspective. We're only 20 miles down the road, so it's not like we're particularly far away, but we currently have 981 students from Topeka at KU right now. And we have about 9,400 alumni from Topeka. So clearly that connection has been a strong one for a very long time, and I've met a lot of great alumni here today, so thank you for having me. And we send a lot of students to Topeka, particularly as interns, into the State House. I think KU's got the largest number of interns in the State House at any given time, and proximity, I'm sure, has a lot to do with that. But it's an incredible experience for those young students to be able to spend time with our legislators, as well as with the firms in Topeka. So it's been a great relationship. As Andy said, I stepped into this role at the beginning of July, so it's been just 4.5, 5 months, I guess, in that. And in that time, I've been crisscrossing the state, meeting with a lot of people, a lot of folks, and starting to crisscross the country. I drove about 6,000 miles on my car since the middle of August, so it's been a busy time, but just a great opportunity to get out and meet people and hear their perspectives about what we're doing well and what we're doing not so well. And actually, that's equally important. I'm happy to say that it's been a pretty smooth transition. Bernadette Great-Little, my predecessor, has really made that quite simple for me and very easy. We have a great working relationship, as we had for the previous 5 years as the Executive Vice Chancellor of the Medical Center. So that was pretty easy, and had a great team of leaders. Neely Bendapudi is my provost, and Executive Vice Chancellor Lawrence, and as many of you probably know Neely, she's just a dynamo. And it's great to work with, and we're having a lot of fun together. And then Rob Samari, who was my dean at the School of Medicine in Kansas City, has stepped in as the interim executive vice chancellor. And Rob is actually the first alumnus of the KU School of Medicine to come back as dean. He grew up in the Kansas City area, went through the Shawnee Mission School District, went to Notre Dame undergrad, and did his medical school back at KU. And then spent his postgraduate training in Boston and 28 years at the Mayo Clinic before we recruited him back to Kansas City. And he's just been a great addition, a great asset. So very fortunate to have a really strong team around me as well. And despite certainly some pretty challenging times, both, we'll knock your podium off, break the other one. Challenging times both, economically at the federal level as well as the state level, as we all know. Really, KU's in a pretty good place, all things considered. We've had 4 straight years of enrollment growth, and that maybe doesn't sound that impressive, but that's against a backdrop of a decrease in enrollment in universities in the United States every year since 2010. And so it certainly is bucking the national trend from an enrollment perspective. And that might seem a bit concerning, actually, to hear that that's happening nationally, but the reality is that's what happens when you have a 4% unemployment rate, that kids go into the workforce as well as going to school. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but those are just the trends that you see. And as I said, I think that's not all bad. But a lot of that enrollment growth, I think, is attributed to a number of things, one of which is an aggressive effort about 3 years ago to completely revamp the undergraduate curriculum. And doing that, an effort that we call the KU Core was an effort to redesign really what are the requirements for any given degree, what are the prerequisites for a given degree. And when you looked at those, and you really thought about it logically, those were designed to provide our students with competencies, not necessarily a specific class. And what we also saw was specific classes could be bottlenecks to students progressing through their education. So if everybody had to take English 101, could you offer enough English 101 sections to get them all through in the time that they needed to get through? And the answer is no. So it really was not very logical, even though we've been doing it for decades, it wasn't a very logical way to do it. And so really redesigning how that whole piece worked has really led to the highest retention and progression rates that we've ever seen at the university, and it's just one of the efforts that's gone into that. Obviously, we've had a lot of transformation on our campuses, physical transformation. So if you've been back on the Lawrence campus, you've seen a lot of activity there. The new business school, the Capitol Federal Building is spectacular. If you've not had an opportunity to see that, the Bruce Center with the rules of basketball and what's going on around now in the Fieldhouse, the new Earth Energy and Environment Center, which will open up this spring, is a combination, an interdisciplinary combination of geology and engineering and environmental sciences all kind of smashed together to really collaborate to a much higher degree. It has some amazing innovative spaces in it, like 3-dimensional rooms you can go in and work in a 3-dimensional space within the project that you're working on. The Spencer Art Museum, if you haven't been there, we heard a great suggestion to visit the museum at Washburn. We just finished a big model on the Spencer Art Museum, which turned out beautifully. And if you have a chance at campus, I would highly recommend checking that out as well. But we've had projects at all our other campuses as well. Kansas City at the Medical Center in the last really since July, we've opened the new health education building, which is the most state-of-the-art health education building in the United States right now. It's for all 3 schools, medicine, nursing, and health professions, interprofessionally intertwined in very innovative small group, activity-focused type spaces with 3 floors of simulation of hospitals, clinics, apartments, where they can learn in a very real environment. We also just opened a new hospital tower just in October, actually. But really, my pride and joy as Executive Vice Chancellor was the largest parking garage in 2 states. That was my ultimate passion to get that one done. And I think people are more excited about that than either of the other 2, to be honest with you. But really, and then our School of Medicine out in Salina, which you may or may not be aware, but that's the smallest four-year medical school in the United States. We take 8 students per year for 4 years of medical school in Salina. But we just expanded that to include a nursing school as well. There's a new, really not a new building, but a remodeled building down on Main Street as part of their Main Street. It's Santa Fe, it's not Main Street, but a downtown renovation and Salina project, and they're rehabbing the Bank of America building there, which is going to be incredible space as well. And we've recently done a new space down in Wichita. So a lot of physical transformation going on as well, but really none of that would have been possible without incredible philanthropic support. So we finished our Far Above campaign in 2016. That was an 8-year campaign. We set out to raise pretty audacious $1.2 billion. We raised $1.7 billion. And that's really what has funded almost everything that I've just described. With the exception of the hospital tower, about a third of that was funded philanthropically. And the health education building is the only building of all those I just described that had any state dollars involved with it at all. And about a third of that came from the state. So the state has really gotten out of the building business. And so really everything that I just described has really been philanthropically driven. And it was through that campaign and ongoing campaigns that really enabled us to do that. So starting from that point and going forward and looking at what's happening in higher education, my goal for KU is really to make it the destination research institution, not only for this part of the country, but for all of the country. I really think we have the tools to do that. I think we have the opportunity to continue to elevate the national stature around that and to draw the best and brightest really from across the country and across the globe here, and hopefully some of them stay. As they come to Kansas. So the 3 areas I'm going to focus on really for the next few years is the first one is really what I call the student experience. And we think about student success as graduation and retention rates, but really the student experience is the whole package. And I really draw on that from our healthcare world, but we have really redesigned healthcare around the patient experience. Healthcare used to be run very much designed around the providers, which as a surgeon, that was awesome, by the way, to have the world centered around you, but in reality, that was not particularly good for our patients, and it certainly didn't produce the best outcomes. And so we have rotated that thinking to really put the patient at the center of every conversation and every decision that you make. Is this the right thing to do for the patient, and is the best way to do it for the patient? And that really changes how you design your systems, it changes how you manage your schedules, it changes almost everything. And so I think we have an opportunity to do that in higher education. I think in higher education, we are largely designed around our providers, which is really the faculty. I mean, we and the administration. I think we expect our students to come and conform to how we do things, as opposed to figuring out, are we doing things that is the best way to do it for the student, and to make sure that they have the best possible experience there as they go out. So that's something that we're going to be working on. We've made a lot of progress there, but we've got tremendous opportunity there, I believe. And then as a state asset to continue to expand our outreach across the state of Kansas. And our reach is pretty far right now. For example, the medical center, we have activities in all 105 counties in the state of Kansas. When you look at efforts like the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center, how many of you knew that KU actually runs that? Yeah, that's kind of what my own faculty would say as well. But actually, KU has, since 1968, run the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. And we train about almost 900 new police officers every year for the state. We do continuing education for 10,000 police officers every year. And that's located at a campus down in Girod, an incredible facility. If you're ever in that area, you gotta go visit. They love to show it off. They might put you in a car and go spin you around outside somewhere, but, or put you through a simulator and see if you can survive an encounter. But it's really a very impressive facility. We do the same for firefighters. We educate about 4,500 firefighters in the state of Kansas every year. Again, most people just aren't aware that that's an activity that KU does. The LEAD Center, our Center for Performing Arts, has activities and streams content to 73 counties across the state of Kansas every year, and that number is growing every year. So we're trying to figure out how we can leverage the assets that we have as a university to better enhance the services that we provide completely across the entire state. And then the third area to focus on for me is to continue to grow our research enterprise. And there's a number of reasons to do that, some obvious, maybe some less obvious. But we currently bring in about $240 million a year of research dollars into the state of Kansas. And that's money that comes from outside of Kansas into Kansas to conduct research. Obviously, that creates a lot of jobs, creates a lot of discoveries, and that's really the whole point of it, is to create discoveries that change the world. It creates a pipeline and a degree of activity that really draws business. And so we're starting to see businesses relocate or to at least open offices in Lawrence to be close to our scientists, and in Kansas City, our incubator there to be close to our scientists. So we now have partnerships with companies like Ford and ADM and Garmin, who have offices on our campus, to leverage that effort. And what we've really seen in the private sector is companies getting out of the research business. They're pretty much out of the R&D business for the most part, and they're leveraging universities to do that. Contractually so in some instances, and just cherry picking ideas in other instances. It's a much quicker turnaround time for their investors. And so, whereas R&D used to be about 80% done in private industry, now about 10% of it's done in private industry. And really the infrastructure is now reliant entirely on our universities to do that in the United States. I think that's a danger from a global dominance perspective. I think our strength as a country has been our science and our innovation, our technology, and our ability to be entrepreneurial. But as this dynamic has changed, I think that really puts a lot of pressure on it, particularly since we're relying on largely federal dollars to do a lot of that research. And that then subsequently compromises really the next generation of scientists, because that's the other thing we do with our researchers, we train the next generation of scientists. And so I think that's a very important thing that we play for this region. The KU does uniquely, KU and K-State in particular, our researcher areas overlap some, but are highly complementary in the work that we do. And I think it's critical to the economic engine of the state of Kansas going forward. So those are kind of three things that I really want to work on. A couple things just about how we connect with Kansas and the society as a whole. As I mentioned, we've had consecutive years of enrollment growth in our current class. Is really the brightest, but also the most diverse that we've ever had at KU. Working with those students to engage them in this outreach process in a number of different ways. I talked about the law enforcement area, but we also run the Kansas Geological Survey, which really does a lot of research into water, which is a big issue, particularly for western Kansas, and maintains that. We run the Certified Public Management Program that runs here out of Topeka. In fact, we have graduation tomorrow for, I think, about 80 people who have finished this program. And we have certified public managers in almost every community in the state of Kansas at this point in time. So really trying to leverage that, but also get the students involved in those activities as we can fairly early on. Going back to the research just for a minute, we have, well, first of all, we have a number of our programs that are sort of very highly ranked. I mentioned city management. It's actually ranked #1 in the United States. It's the #1 city management program in the country. Our special education program is ranked #1 in the United States. We have a number of programs that are in the top 20, but we have a couple that are the best in the United States. We've put a lot of effort into taking our activities on campus, and in particular our research activities, and spinning those out for economic development. We have about 125 or 27 license agreements where companies have licensed technologies that we've developed at KU, and they've taken those out and are running with them as companies. And I mentioned the partnerships that we've developed with Ford and ADM and Garmin and others. Really thinking about workforce, and it's really the workforce conversation that got me interested in taking this job to start with. As Executive Vice Chancellor at the Medical Center, I was asked to co-chair an effort to develop an economic development plan for the Kansas City metropolitan area. I co-chaired that with a guy named Scott Smith, who's just retired as CEO of H&TB Engineering, one of the multinational engineering firms in town. And we spent about 3 years. We had about 250, as a business law events, we had about 250 business leaders involved in that project. And And as we went through all the various industry sectors, there were a couple fairly common themes. One, and workforce was hands down the biggest one. That the workforce challenges of making sure that we have graduates to fill the jobs that we're creating. And we're struggling with that. In the Kansas City metro area, they're hiring about somewhere in the range of 5,000 to 7,000 engineers every year or two. We generate about 1,000. So we've got some imbalances there. We do pretty well from an attainment perspective in this region of the country. The number of people that have degrees is higher than average. But degrees are not always where the jobs are. We have kind of a disconnect there. So we've got opportunity around that. So as we think about that from KU, we produce 6,000 graduates every year into the workforce. But we need to make sure that those graduates are focused in the right areas. Also, as we've leveraged those technologies, we've spun out 38 companies that have come out of KU directly. Those are largely our faculty. In a couple of cases, our students started those companies and are being very active. So when I think about going forward, what some of our opportunities are, we're trying to think about what those are. The new nursing school in Salina is one of those opportunities to continue to help serve the state. We have a new national security laboratory coming online in March. It's the 14th in the United States, and that allows you to do the most top secret research. And we have some areas, aerospace engineering, high throughput supercomputing, unmanned aircraft, and superfluidics are areas that we have state-of-the-art, but what is considered top secret in a lot of areas to do the highest level of research. So that's a great opportunity for us, we think, going forward. And we'll draw a lot of industry with it. We certainly have our fair share of challenges. We'll be working with the legislature this year. Number one priority is the same for all higher education, which is just to restore the cuts. I mean, the cuts that we took in 2016, we've been cut every year since 2010. And in fact, if you look at where our funding is from 2000 to year 2000 to now, inflation adjusted, our state funding is down 40%. In that period of time. And not surprisingly, you've seen tuitions go in the other direction at the same time. Now, tuition has an offset what the state is doing. The state dollars, which only makes up about 17% of our budget, but it funds the core infrastructure of the educational enterprise. Nothing else funds that. Philanthropy doesn't fund that. Industry doesn't want to fund that. Nobody else funds that. And so that's what we rely very heavily on the state for. K-State's got the same story, Wichita State's got the same story, Fort Hays has the same story. So we are together having one message, which is just at least restore the base cuts that we took. And it's going to be hard this year. You all know we got a big K-12 challenge coming to the legislature. They're going to have a rough year. They were hoping to have an easy year. It's not going to happen. This one's going to be tough. But that's going to be our message, and we're going to keep it pretty simple. Certainly we have some challenges at the federal level. I will tell you the tax reform plan going through right now does not look good for higher education. And there are about 10 reasons why, because there's about 10 things in there that are very bad for higher education. And higher education often means the students. Your ability to write off the interest on your student loans goes away. Graduate students who are the next generation of scientists that have their tuition waived now pay taxes on that. Those are just things that make it much harder for us to do the job that we do to generate the workforce that you all need for your businesses out there. So we certainly have our fair share of challenges. We know we got a great team. We're starting from a great place, and we got a great state behind us. So thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'd love to answer some questions if anybody had any, and time allows. I don't know how many are time. Madam, 5 minutes of questions? Okay. Yeah.
You've got a lot of responsibilities, and you've got a very successful program in a lot of ways at the university. There seems to be two needs in the state of Kansas, at least from a lot of different people's perspective. I kind of want to know what your role, as you perceive it, might be in helping. One is to provide medical personnel to the western side of the state, especially in the smaller communities. And the other one is not only have a good basketball program, but a good football program.
I knew that was going to come up. I'll start with the first one. We've been struggling with the workforce needs in healthcare in Western Kansas for 60 years, and we've been working on it for 60 years. So actually, KU is number 2 in the United States in producing primary care physicians, and number 6 in the United States in producing physicians for rural practice. Our systems are working pretty good. They're just not keeping up with the rate at which people are retiring is our challenge right now. And it's because we started this effort later than we probably should have. And that's a national comment, not just a local one. And so, that was the impetus behind our Rural Scholars Program. We recruit kids that are sophomores in college from rural environments, and if we recruit them if they meet the criteria, and I met one last night, and they keep their grades up, they're automatically admitted to medical school. We have the focus, every one of our students spends at least 8 weeks out in a rural community to have the opportunity to experience that, and they love it actually, doing that. We created really the Salina campus with that focus. What we learned is you can take kids out of a small town in western Kansas and you bring them to Kansas City. They spend 4 years there and they meet somebody and life gets complicated, and sometimes they go back and sometimes they don't. So the concept really around the campus in Salina was people, kids who really do have a passion for rural health care, to train them in Salina, which is not particularly rural. If you've been in Salina, it's about 50,000 people, but it is in the central part of the state. And they rotate, they spend a lot of their time in that rural environment to keep them in that environment. And we're only we're about to graduate our 3rd class out of that, but they've already hired 3 of those back into the communities around there. So it looks like that's going to work as a pipeline as well. And how do we leverage that more? And then really the residency training piece of that, which is a long conversation, but that's the biggest challenge we have. The number of residency positions, and you can't graduate medical school and go through a shingle. You have to go to a residency program before you can get licensed. And the number of residency slots in the United States was capped in 1996 at the federal level. And so we haven't changed that number. We've increased enrollment in medical schools, us included, by 30%, but we've increased the number of residency slots by less than 4%. So we're now, historically we had an excess, and those were filled by foreign medical graduates and from medical schools offshore in the Caribbean. We're filling them all with you. We're now having U.S. graduates not get residency slots, and so we've completely changed that dynamic, and we are bumping up against that cap, which is a federal cap right now that we've got to figure out how to fix. But that's probably our current bottleneck at the moment. Great question. I skipped football.
With all the other state universities, what's the process? Can you talk a little bit about the process of how you coordinate with the other universities in terms of how you prioritize your focus areas and your resources, and how it's determined on the broad spectrum of educational,
right.
Who's doing what?
So the coordination between the state universities, that really occurs not just at universities, but community colleges as well. And the Board of Regents is really, I would say in the last 4 years in particular, has really driven into that to say, how do we get the whole system working better together? And that started actually pushing now down into the high schools, which is how do we get dual credit? I mean, how do you get college credit in high school? How do we make sure that that works well, and then it automatically bumps to the next level? And then if you finish your coursework at a community college, to make sure that that immediately bumps into a 4-year college if that's what you want to do, and that there's no hiccups, and that all that coursework flows all the way through, and you don't have to repeat anything. So that articulation piece, we call that, we've been working on for 4 or 5 years to try and make that as seamless as possible. It's not perfect yet, but it's way better than it was, and we've got a lot of work to do there. In terms of programming, we also work pretty hard, particularly when people are looking at adding new programs, to try and, if we've already got it at 3 universities, we often won't start a new program. We'll leverage the ones that are there. But in some instances, we leverage faculty to create new programs. And I'll use an example. Our nurse practitioner program at the Medical Center now is a collaborative with Fortes, Pittsburgh State, and Wichita State. They share faculty among all those to make that program work. And because the biggest challenge in that program is faculty. There aren't enough of them around. And so we leverage largely the faculty out of Kansas City to help run those other programs. So trying to figure out how we can do things collaboratively and less expensively is sort of where the trend has been going as we've looked at these programs. And then there are some new areas that we have high demand, and we learned that in Kansas City as we were doing the economic development work, and cybersecurity came up in every single conversation that we had. And when we started that conversation in the broader Kansas City area, which included all the way out to K-State, there were only 2 cybersecurity programs in all of higher education. There's now 12. A year later, there's 12. So we're trying to react in that way as well to really what the demands are of the marketplace. And even the marketplace didn't realize that was a crisis. So you got to create an environment to have those conversations.
Chancellor, we are so grateful for your words and your sharing your time with us today. And rather than giving you a Rotary coffee cup, which will just gather dust, it's our tradition to provide a book to a local school, Ross Elementary, and this is called A Little Jayhawk Tale. And on the book plate on that. The other thing is that we'd like to give you a Rotary coin that has the 4-way test on the back. And please enjoy it for a while and then pass it on if you would. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
At the Ramada in the Grand Ballroom, and our own Todd Payne will be talking to us about climbing 14,000 peaks, 14,000-foot peaks. December 14th, we will be at the Capitol Plaza, and we'll have our Christmas celebration, holiday celebration, and we will have no meetings on the 21st or the 28th of December. So I'd like to leave you today with a quote from a great basketball coach, John Wooden, who said, "You can't live a perfect day without doing something for someone who will never be able to repay you." So let's stand and close the meeting with the 4-way test plus 1. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
And will it be fun?